always get excited when I get to work with a new ingredient, and today I get to use bulgur. Today we're going to be making a cherry cobbler that uses bulgur as one of the ingredients in it. So what is bulgur, you might ask? Bulgur is actually a wheat product, and it is kind of like quinoa in the way that it looks. And supposedly it absorbs liquid really well and can be used either in savory or sweet cases because of that. So if you put it into some sort of meat flavoring, whether that be a broth or something, in fact there's a lot of recipes, if you look up bulgur recipes, some of the ones that come up are pilafs that use a meat broth as a way to flavor this. Today's recipe comes to us from 1964 and the Agricultural Research Service of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I want to read just a short little snippet that comes from the beginning of this book that is all based on recipes for bulgur. It says, several years ago, the U.S. Department of Agriculture and industrial and growers groups initiated research and development aimed at wider use of bulgur, both domestically and abroad. The investigation supplied information on keeping quality and nutritive values, on a process for canning cooked bulgur with or without flavoring, on a process for puffing bulgur grains and pressing them into wafers for such uses as fallout shelter foods, and on a continuous process for manufacture of dry bulgur. The recipes published herein were developed as an aid to wider use of bulgur. And so in this cookbook there are both savory and sweet uses, as well as recipes for sauces, as recipes for all sorts of different items. It's basically saying you can use bulgur in just about any kind of recipe that you can imagine. So today we're going to be making a cherry cobbler with a bulgur shortcake. Step number one is to get our bulgur cooking, because we don't actually use this in the recipe until after it's in its cooked form, but it tells us how to do that. We're going to take a cup of water into a small pan, as well as a quarter cup of our bulgur, and we're just going to throw that right in there and stir that around a little bit. And then it says that we're going to put that onto a simmer for about 20 minutes until all of the liquid is absorbed. And it specifically says not to boil, so make sure your heat isn't too high when you're cooking your bulgur. While that's cooking, I'm going to get started on the rest of the dough for our shortcake. And to do that, we're going to need 2 cups of flour, and that's messily going to go into the sifter. Also, we have 3½ teaspoons of baking powder, and we have a teaspoon of salt, and also some sugar. A 3rd cup of sugar is going to go into this, and I'm just going to sift that. To our sifted ingredients, we're going to add a 1/4 cup of shortening. Now, I'm actually using vegetable shortening, but you could use butter, you could use margarine, you could use probably even any kind of solid fat that you've got around. You could use, again, I'm using vegetable shortening here, and using a pastry cutter, we're just going to cut that into our dry ingredients. Our bulgur has cooked and most of the liquid has been absorbed. There's still a little bit floating around in there, but our wheat, the bulgur itself, has puffed up, and I've never cooked this before, but I would say that looks done. Again, it reminds me a lot of quinoa in the way that this looks and the texture that it appears to be. But we need to add some of that to our dry ingredients, which we're going to do here in just a second, as well as we have 3/4 cup of milk that we're going to add to our mix. Now, we're not actually going to be adding all of the bulgur here. We're only going to be using 3/4 cup of this, so I'm going to measure that out, and then we'll add that in. So apparently I lied. After I measured out everything that was in the pan, it came out to exactly 3/4 of a cup of the bulgur. So we're gonna add all of that into our mixture here and then give this a stir. And we're actually gonna be setting this aside because we need to prepare the fruit part of our cobbler next. Before we begin the fruit part of this recipe, I just wanted to make a note that you could make a variation of this in any way that you would like to. If you are not a fan of cherries, which is what the original recipe is, you could use really any canned kind of fruit. I know there's a lot of more recent or more modern recipes that would use a can of pie filling. We're not looking for a can of pie filling, we're looking for a can of fruit. So make sure that you're going down the right aisle for this when you're at the store, that you're not getting the pie filling, but you're getting actual canned fruit. You could use apricots, you could use blueberries, you could do peach, you could do any kind of berries, whatever you want, as long as it is canned fruit that is not a pie filling. But we actually need to drain this first. I have a can here. The recipe calls for a 1 pound can. I'm not sure that this really is a 1 pound can, but it is roughly the right size, I think. So I am just draining the juice out here from this, and then the recipe says that we are going to need to add some water so that this equals 1 cup. And that's actually pretty close as it is there. That's about 3/4 of a cup, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of water here. And now we have 1 cup of liquid. Before this goes in the oven, we're actually going back to the stove one more time. Let me make sure I'm doing this in the right order here. We need to put in 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, which I have here. Then we're going to add some sugar. The recipe actually calls for a cup of sugar, but it makes a note that if you're using a can of fruit that has sweetened heavy syrup, which ours does, to only use a 1/2 cup of sugar. So that's what we have. And then we're going to stir our juice mixture into that. And we're going to bring that over to the stove and cook over a moderate heat until this starts to thicken and starts to boil. All right, we have our sauce that we have just pulled from the stove, and it is a nice texture. The recipe actually says if you so desire, you could add some red food coloring, but I don't know why you would want to, because this is a beautiful, deep, purplish red, and I'm not gonna touch that with a 10-foot pole, so I am going to leave that. What we are going to do now, according to the directions, is we are going to add our drained cherries and we have 2 teaspoons of lemon juice that I have freshly squeezed there, so I'm adding in those cherries and then the lemon juice, and I'm gonna grab a spoon and give that a stir. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to pour this into a 9-inch cake pan, which I have here, and then we are going to drop in our shortcake dough by the tablespoon onto our fruit preparation that we have here. Half an hour, 400 degrees. Let's check it and see what we got. This is insanely hot, but I'm gonna give it a try anyway. It's totally different than any other cobbler that I think I've had, purely by just the ratio of the biscuit to the fruit. However, it tastes good. You have that nice cherry sweet sauce, and then tons and tons of biscuit. I think if I were to do this again, I would probably double the amount of fruit that goes into this, and do it in a bigger pan and just keep the same amount of biscuits, because it really is a biscuit recipe that you add some sugar to create a shortbread for the top. It tastes fine though. I think that our bulgur actually adds like a nutty flavor to this, because I did taste some of the bulgur on its own just to see what it was like. And it also adds a little bit more of a rustic or coarse texture to this as well. I like it. It's a nice, not overly sweet treat. I think because of the decreased amount of sugar that they were compensating for the syrup. But I would use this as a base recipe. I would modify this, as I mentioned, so that it had more fruit to it. It's not like the recipes for cobbler that I've seen from the American South for things such as a peach cobbler or something like that. But I do like this. Give it a try and let me know what you think. Leave your comments down below and tell me if you think this would be a good recipe or not. And we'll see you next time on Recipe Reviver.